I still remember the exact moment everything changed. Not the dramatic confrontation, that came later, but the quiet decision I made 3 years earlier when I graduated from the Dallas Police Academy. It was a brilliantly hot Texas afternoon, the kind where the sky burns so blue it hurts your eyes and the asphalt radiates heat like a stovetop. I stood outside the academy in my crisp new uniform, scanning the parking lot for familiar faces. My mother's weathered Buick wasn't there. Neither was Uncle Mark's polished Dodge Charger with its police modifications. My brother Brandon's leased BMW was conspicuously absent too. The ceremony had ended 30 minutes earlier. Most of my classmates had already left, surrounded by proud families with balloons and flowers. I checked my phone one more time. 3 missed calls from my roommate wishing me congratulations. Nothing from my family. They must be running late, I told myself, even as I knew better. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Sorry, Jessica, we can't make it. Brandon's business pitch meeting got moved up. Uncle Mark is driving him. So important for his future. Dinner next week to celebrate you both? I stared at those words until they blurred. Then I tucked my phone away, straightened my shoulders, and walked alone to my car, a 2004 Toyota Corolla with mismatched door panels and a perpetual check engine light. I wasn't surprised, not really. This was the Carter family way. Brandon was the star, the charismatic son with big dreams. I was reliable Jessica, the quiet one, the responsible one. That night, I drove past the steakhouse where I'd reserved a table for 4. I canceled it from the parking lot, watching through the window as a family that wasn't mine celebrated something at the exact table I'd requested. Instead of steak, I ate microwave ramen in my shared apartment, watching raindrops race down my window. My roommate Rachel was out with her boyfriend, so I had the place to myself. The apartment was tiny, all we could afford on my cadet stipend and her barista salary, but it had been home for 2 years. I opened my laptop and created a spreadsheet titled Budget Post Academy. I was going to be making $58,000 a year as a rookie officer. Not a fortune, but more than I'd ever earned. I meticulously calculated rent, utilities, student loans, car payments, and groceries. When I was done, I leaned back, satisfied with the sensible financial plan I'd created. My phone rang. Mom. Jessica, thank God you picked up, she said, her voice tight with controlled panic. We have a situation. My police training kicked in. What's wrong? Are you hurt? No, honey. It's the mortgage. I'm 3 months behind. The bank. They sent a final notice today. The panic in her voice was real, but I also recognized another emotion hidden beneath it. Embarrassment. Mom had always been proud, never asking for help even when Dad left us 10 years ago for his dental hygienist. How much? I asked. She hesitated. $6,000. But don't worry, I'll figure something out. $6,000. My entire savings from working night shifts at Denny's throughout the academy. I'll transfer it tonight, I heard myself say before I could think it through. The relief in her voice was palpable. You're an angel, Jessica. Just until Brandon's business takes off. He's meeting investors next week. After we hung up, I stared at my budget spreadsheet for a long time. Then I opened a new tab and created another one. I labeled it Family Support. I entered the first $6,000 under Mortgage Bailout May. Little did I know this would be the first entry of many. Over the next 6 months, I settled into my role as Officer Jessica Carter. I worked the graveyard shift in South Dallas, learned to sleep through daylight, and memorized every back alley in my patrol area. I was good at my job, calm under pressure, thorough with paperwork, compassionate with victims. My supervising officers noticed. What they didn't notice was how I lived, in the same cramped apartment, eating the same budget meals, driving the same dying car. The second call came in November. Brandon needed $3,500 for business expenses. Something about website development and marketing materials. It's for the pitch deck, he explained over the phone, his voice bubbling with excitement. These investors are huge, Jess. We're talking 7 figures if they bite. I transferred the money that night. The third call came at Christmas. Mom needed $2,000 for unexpected expenses. I later discovered those expenses included a new leather jacket for Brandon and a weekend trip to Austin for a networking opportunity. By my first anniversary on the force, I had transferred nearly $20,000 to my family. My savings were gone. Yide. Had started picking up overtime shifts and security gigs at the local mall. Rachel moved out to live with her boyfriend, and I couldn't afford the apartment alone. I downsized to a studio in a neighborhood that made my fellow officers raise their eyebrows. You sure about living there, Carter? My partner Martinez asked. We responded to 2 shootings on that block last month. I shrugged. Rent's cheap, and I'm armed. What I didn't tell him was that every dollar I saved on rent was another dollar I could send to my family. I had begun to see it as my duty, not just as a daughter and sister, but as an officer. Protect and serve, starting at home. The irony wasn't lost on me that while I was keeping the peace in Dallas's roughest neighborhoods, I was also silently keeping my family afloat. Uncle Mark never knew, or at least I thought he didn't. A 20-year veteran of the force, he was the reason I'd become a cop in the first place. I'd grown up admiring his stories, his confidence, his sense of purpose. When I joined the academy, I thought we'd share a special bond. Instead, he became Brandon's biggest cheerleader, introducing him to connections and bragging about his nephew's entrepreneurial spirit at family gatherings. Brandon's got vision, he'd say, clapping my brother on the shoulder. He thinks big. That's what this family needs. Someone to put the Carter name on the map. And what did the Carter family need from me? My next paycheck, apparently. At night, alone in my studio apartment, I'd sometimes stare at my growing family support spreadsheet and ask myself why I kept doing this. The numbers had become staggering. $24,000, $35,000, $42,000. But every time I considered stopping, I remembered something my father said before he left. In this world, there are givers and takers. Givers sleep better, but takers eat better. I wanted to sleep at night, even if it meant eating ramen for dinner. Again. The truth is, I also believed in Brandon. Behind his bluster and charm, I glimpsed real talent sometimes. Maybe he really would make it big. Maybe all this sacrifice would pay off. Maybe one day, he'd look back and realize what I'd done for him. Maybe. But as month after month passed with more requests, more emergencies, more just until my big break, a quiet resentment began to build inside me. Not because of the money itself, but because of the invisibility of my contribution. No one knew, no one saw, no one valued, until the day everything changed. I remember that Tuesday like it was etched into my skin. May 15th, 2 years and 3 months since I'd graduated from the academy. 2 years and 3 months of silent financial sacrifice. I just finished a double shift that had stretched into 16 hours after a multi-vehicle pileup on the interstate. My uniform smelled like asphalt and someone else's blood. All I wanted was a hot shower and sleep. Instead, I got a text from Mom. Family dinner tonight. 7 p.m. Uncle Mark will be there. Big news from Brandon. I texted back. Just worked 16 HRs. Can we reschedule? The response came immediately. Please, Jess. Your brother needs all of us there. It's important. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of obligation pressed down on my shoulders. Sleep would have to wait. Family came first. It always did. At least for me. The house I pulled up to at 6:58 p.m. was the same 2-story suburban home I'd grown up in. The mortgage I was still helping pay. The yard needed mowing and the paint was peeling around the windows, but it was home. I parked my Corolla behind Uncle Mark's gleaming Charger and Brandon's new Audi. The contrast wasn't lost on me. My decade-old economy car sandwiched between their shiny status symbols. Inside, the smell of pot roast and freshly baked rolls wrapped around me like a memory. Mom was in her element, rushing between kitchen and dining room. Uncle Mark stood by the fireplace in his full police uniform, chest puffed out, glass of sweet tea in hand. Brandon lounged on the sofa, scrolling through his phone, a self-satisfied smile playing at his lips. There she is, Mom called out. Our hero in blue. I accepted her quick hug, feeling the exhaustion in my bones. Sorry about the uniform. Didn't have time to change. Uncle Mark nodded approvingly. Looking sharp, Officer Carter? Brandon barely looked up. You smell like work. That's because I came straight from work, I replied, too tired to mask the edge in my voice. Mom intervened quickly. Let's eat. Brandon has exciting news. We gathered around the dining table, the same oak table where I'd done homework, where Dad had announced he was leaving, where I'd quietly written my first check to save this very house. Uncle Mark said grace, thanking God for family, for blessings, and specifically for Brandon's bright future. My contribution to keeping the roof over our heads didn't warrant a mention. Brandon could barely wait until the amen to launch into his announcement. So, you know I've been grinding for this moment, he began, using his presentation voice, the one he practiced in mirrors. All those networking events, All those late nights perfecting my business plan. I nodded mechanically, not mentioning that I'd paid for those networking events, or that his late nights were often spent at bars with potential investors on my dime. Well, it finally happened. He paused dramatically. Breakthrough Capital just signed me to a consulting contract. $50,000 for 6 months of work. Mom gasped. Uncle Mark whooped. I forced a smile. That's great, Brandon, I said, genuinely happy for him despite everything. Congratulations. It gets better, he continued, his eyes gleaming. I'm moving into the Ashton next month. You know, that luxury high-rise downtown? 2-bedroom, floor-to-ceiling windows, rooftop pool. The Ashton, where rent started at $3,000 a month, where I'd helped him put down the security deposit last week, $6,000 I'd earned working protection detail at a wealthy businessman's daughter's Sweet 16. And, he said, reaching for Mom's hand, I'm paying off the rest of the mortgage. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Oh, Brandon. Uncle Mark clapped him on the shoulder. I always knew you had it in you, son. Always knew it. The room spun around me. The mortgage, the one I'd been steadily paying for 2 years. Without recognition. The one Brandon now claimed he would pay off in a grand gesture of success. Something inside me cracked. A small hairline fracture in the dam I'd built to contain my resentment. That's wonderful, I managed to say. When does the contract actually start? Brandon's smile faltered slightly. Next month, but they're advancing me some funds to get settled. So you've received the money already? I pressed, unable to stop myself. Uncle Mark frowned. Jessica, don't rain on your brother's parade. This is his moment. I'm just asking a question, I said, suddenly feeling the weight of every double shift, every skipped meal, every dollar transferred. Sometimes, Jessica, Uncle Mark said in his authoritative police voice, you need to swallow your pride and be happy for your brother. Brandon worked hard. You could learn something from him. The crack widened. Learn something? I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. Mom sensed the tension. Who wants dessert? I made your favorite, Jess. Apple pie. But I couldn't let it go. Not this time. What exactly should I learn, Uncle Mark? How to take credit for other people's sacrifices. The room went silent. Brandon's smug expression hardened. What's that supposed to mean? He demanded. I looked around the table, at my mother's anxious face, at Uncle Mark's disapproving frown, at Brandon's defensive posture, and made a decision. Nothing, I said, pushing back from the table. It doesn't mean anything. Congratulations on your success, Brandon. I stood up, my uniform suddenly feeling too heavy, too confining. I need to go. I haven't slept in 20 hours. As I walked to the door, I heard Uncle Mark mutter, some people just can't handle seeing others succeed. The dam broke. I turned slowly, feeling an eerie calm descend over me. Give me 5 minutes, I said. I need to get something from my car. Outside in the warm Texas evening, I sat in my Corolla, hands shaking on the steering wheel. In the glove compartment was a folder, thick with papers, receipts, and a contract I'd had Brandon sign when things first started, a document he'd probably forgotten about completely. For 2 years, I'd kept meticulous records of every dollar sent, every bill paid, every loan that was never repaid. Not because I expected repayment, but because some part of me, the part trained in police procedure, knew that. Evidence matters. I clutched the folder to my chest and made my choice. The truth would come out tonight. The weight of silence had become too heavy to bear. I walked back into the dining room with deliberate slowness, the folder clutched against my chest like a shield. They were still seated around the table, forks clinking against dessert plates, conversation flowing again as if my departure had been nothing more than a brief interruption. And the view from the 22nd floor is insane, Brandon was saying, gesturing with his fork. You can see the entire downtown skyline. Uncle Mark nodded appreciatively. That's prime real estate. You've earned it, son. I cleared my throat. 3 heads turned toward me simultaneously, expressions ranging from surprise to wariness. Jess, Mom said, her voice artificially bright, I saved you some pie. I'm not hungry, I replied, moving to the empty chair I'd abandoned minutes earlier. But I do have something to share. I placed the folder on the table between us. Plain manila, unremarkable except for the neat label on its tab. Family support, 2022-2025. Brandon eyed it suspiciously. What's this? Evidence, I said simply. Uncle Mark's. Posture shifted instantly into cop mode. back straightening, eyes narrowing. Evidence of what exactly? I opened the folder with steady hands and removed the first document. A bank statement showing a $6,000 transfer to Mom's account, dated May 18th, 2022. This was 3 days after my academy graduation, I explained, my voice even. The mortgage was 3 months behind. The bank was threatening. Foreclosure. Mom's face flushed. Jessica, this isn't necessary. I continued as if she hadn't spoken, pulling out the next statement. August 2022. Another $4,500 for property taxes and insurance. One by one, I laid the papers on the table. Bank statements, receipts, notes I'd made after phone calls begging for financial help. October 2022, $3,500 for Brandon's business expenses. December, $2,000 for Christmas emergencies. March 2023, $7,200 for 6 months of mortgage payments in advance. The pile grew. No one spoke. No one moved. July 2023, $5,500 for Brandon's Startup Accelerator program fees. September, $3,000 for Mom's medical bills after insurance denied the claim. I kept going, my voice steady despite the emotion building in my chest. January 2024, $8,300 to pay off Brandon's credit card debt so he could qualify for a business loan. April, $6,000 for the security deposit on the Ashton. Yes, the same luxury apartment you're so excited about. Brandon's face had lost all color. Mom was staring at her hands, twisted in her lap. Uncle Mark remained stone-faced, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. I saved the most damning piece for last. A handwritten contract dated June 10th, 2022. At the top, in neat block letters, loan agreement between Jessica Carter and Brandon Carter. You signed this, I said, sliding it toward my brother. You promised to repay everything once your business got off the ground. Your words, not mine. Brandon didn't touch the paper. He didn't need to. His signature was clearly visible at the bottom. The total amount, I said, placing a final spreadsheet on top of the pile, is $61,000. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the wall clock ticking, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, a dog barking faintly in the distance. $61,000, I repeated. That's what I've contributed to this family over the past 2.5 years. That's what I've sacrificed while living in a studio apartment, in a neighborhood where gunshots are a nightly lullaby. That's what I've given while eating ramen and working double shifts and security gigs on my days off. I looked directly at Uncle Mark. Now tell me again, who should be ashamed? He couldn't hold my gaze. For the first time in my life, I watched my larger-than-life uncle, the decorated police officer, the family patriarch since Dad, left, shrink before my eyes. I didn't know, he said finally, his voice uncharacteristically small. You never asked, I countered. You were too busy celebrating Brandon's hustle to notice mine. Brandon pushed his chair back from the table. This isn't fair, Jess. You offered to help. I never forced you. You're right. I cut him off. I offered, every single time, because that's what family does, right? They support each other, but support should go both ways. I turned to my mother, whose eyes were brimming with tears. I don't regret helping you, Mom. I'd do it again. What I regret is allowing myself to become invisible in my own family. The front door opened, and I heard the familiar sound of my Aunt Shirley's voice calling out. Hello? Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare on the highway. Aunt Shirley, Uncle Mark's wife, the most perceptive member of our family, appeared in the dining room doorway, carrying a covered dish. She stopped short when she sensed the tension. What's going on? She asked, looking from face to face before her eyes settled on the pile of papers. What's all this? Uncle Mark couldn't meet his wife's questioning gaze. Mom remained silent, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. It was Brandon who spoke, his voice hollow. Jessica's been funding everything. The house, my business, everything. Aunt Shirley set her dish down and moved to stand behind me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. For how long? Since I graduated from the academy, I answered. She nodded slowly, as if confirming something she'd long suspected. I always wondered how they kept up the mortgage during those months. Her hand squeezed my shoulder. Jessica, you're the only reason this family still has a roof. Her validation, simple, honest, and unsolicited, broke something in me. Tears welled in my eyes for the first time that night. I just wanted to matter, I whispered, my composure finally cracking. I wanted someone to see me. I see you, Aunt Shirley said firmly. I've always seen you. Uncle Mark cleared his throat. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I was wrong, Jessica. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. It was the first apology I'd ever heard from him. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like grief. For all the recognition I'd never received, for all the times I'd swallowed my pride to keep peace in a family that took my sacrifices for granted. I stood up, suddenly exhausted beyond words. I should go. Jessica, please, Mom began, reaching for my hand. We can talk about this. We can make it right. I gently pulled away. Not tonight. I'm too tired tonight. I gathered the documents back into the folder, leaving only the contract on the table. Keep this, I told Brandon. Read it. Remember. It. As I turned to leave, I found myself face to face with Uncle Mark. He was standing at attention, almost as if preparing for inspection. In his eyes, I saw something I'd never seen before when he looked at me. Respect. Officer Carter, he said formally, using my title for the first time. The acknowledgement of my professional identity, separate from my role as daughter, sister, family ATM, felt significant. I nodded once, then walked past him toward the door. Aunt Shirley followed me outside to my car. What will you do now? She asked softly. I looked up at the stars appearing in the darkening Texas sky. I don't know, but whatever it is, I'll be doing it for myself. As I drove away, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of silence had been lifted. The truth was out. What happened next would be up to them. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. I ignored them all, turned off my phone, and slept for another 4 hours. The deepest, most restful sleep I'd had in months. When I finally emerged from my apartment, the world felt different, clearer somehow, as if a perpetual fog had lifted. I walked to the corner cafe, ordered a real breakfast instead of my usual coffee, and watched people go about their Sunday routines. Normal people. People who weren't carrying the financial burden of an entire family. My phone buzzed continuously when I turned it back on. I scrolled through the notifications without opening any messages. Mom, Brandon, Uncle Mark, even Aunt Shirley. They could wait. Today was for me. I drove to White Rock Lake, found a bench overlooking the water, and sat there for hours, watching joggers and families with strollers pass by. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to think about what I wanted, not what my family needed, not what was expected of me, but what Jessica Carter truly desired. By sunset, I had a plan. Monday morning, I walked into Captain Rivera's office at the precinct. Officer Carter, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. What can I do for you? I'd like to apply for the detective exam, I stated, handing him my completed application. And the cybersecurity training program. His eyebrows rose slightly. That's an ambitious combination. I'm ready for more responsibility, sir, and I have the required service time. He studied me for a moment. You know, Carter, I've been waiting for this. Your performance reviews are excellent. Your attention to detail is exceptional. You should have applied months ago. I nodded, accepting his implicit praise. I was dealing with family obligations. And now? Now I'm focusing on my career. He stamped my application. The next exam is in 6 weeks. The cybersecurity program starts next month. I'll put your name forward for both. Thank you, sir. As I turned to leave, he added, Officer Carter, for what it's worth, I think you'll make an excellent detective. His words stayed with me throughout my shift. Validation based on merit, not family connection. It felt refreshingly unfamiliar. The first direct confrontation came that evening. I was microwaving dinner when someone knocked on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw Brandon, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. I considered not answering. Then I took a deep breath and opened the door. Can I come in? He asked, his usual confidence noticeably absent. I stepped aside silently. He entered, taking in my modest studio with new eyes, the fold-out couch that doubled as my bed, the tiny kitchenette, the single window overlooking a brick wall. This is where you live? He asked quietly. This is where I live, I confirmed. He sat on the edge of my couch, hands clasped between his knees. I read the contract last night. All night, actually. I couldn't sleep. I leaned against the counter, waiting. I didn't realize how much, he began, then stopped, struggling for words. I mean, I knew you. Helped sometimes, but I didn't understand the full extent. You never asked, I said simply. No. he agreed. I didn't. He looked up at me, his expression raw. Why did you do it, Jess? Why did you keep giving when I never gave back? The question caught me off guard. I'd expected excuses, maybe even accusations, not genuine curiosity about my motives. Because you're my brother, I said after a moment. Because Mom needed help. Because I believed in you, even when you didn't see me. I see you now, he said quietly. I'm not sure I like what I see in myself, though. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded check. It's not everything. Not yet, but it's a start. I didn't take it. This isn't about the money, Brandon. I know. It's about respect, recognition. He set the check on my coffee table. I can't change the past 3 years, but I can start repaying what I owe, financially and otherwise. I studied my brother's face, searching for the familiar charm that usually masked his true feelings. It wasn't there. Instead, I saw something new. Humility. The contract with Breakthrough Capital. I began cautiously. Is it real? He nodded. It's real. I signed this paperwork last week, but he hesitated. They chose me because of the prototype I developed at that accelerator program. The one you paid for. The admission cost him. I could see it in the flush creeping up his neck. You did the work, I acknowledged. You have talent, Brandon. I never doubted that. But I stood on your shoulders and took all the credit. He ran a hand through his hair. What kind of person does that make me? I didn't answer directly. What happens now? I'm still moving to the Ashton, he said, but I've downsized to a 1-bedroom, and I'm paying off Mom's mortgage with my first check, for real this time. He paused. And I'd like to take you to dinner. Not a family dinner, just us. To start over, maybe. It wasn't everything. It wasn't even close to. Everything that needed to be said and resolved between us. But it was a beginning. I'd like that, I said finally. After Brandon left, I sat on my couch for a long time, staring at the check he'd left behind. $10,000, a sixth of what I'd given, but more than I'd ever expected to get back. The next confrontation was more difficult. Uncle Mark didn't come to my apartment. He waited for me at the precinct after my shift, standing beside his Charger in the parking lot. Got a minute, Officer Carter? He asked formally. I nodded, aware of curious glances from fellow officers passing by. Uncle Mark was well known in the department. We sat in his car, the engine off, air conditioning slowly fading in the summer heat. I've been on the force for 22 years, he began, staring straight ahead through the windshield. I've prided myself on being observant, on seeing what others miss. He turned to face me, but I missed what was happening right in front of me. I said nothing, waiting. I favored Brandon, he admitted. I saw myself in him, the charisma, the big dreams. I wanted him to have opportunities I never had. And what did you see in me? I asked quietly. His answer was brutally honest. Duty, responsibility, the things I value in a fellow officer but took for granted in a niece. The words stung, but the truth in them was undeniable. I misjudged you both, he continued. I overestimated his self-sufficiency and underestimated your strength. I'm sorry, Jessica. Truly sorry. Coming from Uncle Mark, those words carried weight. He'd been my hero. Once, the reason I'd joined the force, the standard I'd measured myself against. I'm applying for detective, I told him. Something like pride flickered in his eyes. You'll make a damn good one. As we sat in silence, I realized that some part of me had been waiting my whole life for this moment. For Uncle Mark to see me not just as his responsible niece, but as a capable officer with ambitions of my own. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. And for now, that was enough. 3 weeks passed. I threw myself into studying for the detective exam, spending my off hours with practice tests and criminal procedure manuals. My tiny apartment became a fortress of focus. Flashcards taped to cabinets, case studies spread across my fold-out couch. Mom called daily. I answered. Sometimes kept our conversations brief and neutral. She was trying in her way. She'd started working more hours at the department store, had cut unnecessary expenses. Small steps toward self-sufficiency. I never meant to burden you, she told me during one call. I just got so used to leaning on you that I forgot you had your own life to build. I let it happen, I admitted. I never set boundaries. Setting boundaries became my new skill. I learned to say no, politely but firmly. When Brandon asked if I could help with one last business expense, I declined. When Mom mentioned the air conditioning needed repair, I suggested she get multiple quotes instead of offering to pay. It wasn't easy. Guilt shadowed me like a persistent suspect, whispering that I was being selfish, that family should come first. But I reminded myself that self-preservation wasn't selfishness. It was necessary. The night before my detective exam, I received a text from Captain Rivera. My office, 0700 tomorrow. My stomach dropped. Had something happened? Was my exam canceled? I arrived at the precinct early, uniform pressed, nerves on edge. Captain Rivera was already at his desk, reviewing files. "Officer Carter," he greeted me. "Close the door." I obeyed, bracing for bad news. "I received a call yesterday," he began, studying me carefully. "From Lieutenant Mark Carter." "Uncle Mark." I maintained a neutral expression. "He informed me that he's recusing himself from any involvement in your detective application process." I blinked in surprise. "Sir? Apparently, you're his niece." Captain Rivera raised an eyebrow. "Something you never mentioned in 3 years on the force." I straightened my shoulders. "I didn't want special treatment, sir. Positive or negative." "Commendable." He nodded approvingly. "Lieutenant Carter also mentioned your aptitude for detail work. Said you've been demonstrating detective qualities since childhood." The unexpected praise from Uncle Mark warmed something in me, but I kept my face professional. "The reason I called you in," Captain Rivera continued, "is to inform you that regardless of your exam results, you've been selected for the cybersecurity training program. Full scholarship. Only 2 officers from our precinct were chosen." My heart raced. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me. Your application was outstanding." He handed me a folder. "Program details. It starts next Monday. 8 weeks of intensive training, some at Quantico." I stared at the folder in disbelief. Quantico, the FBI Academy, the pinnacle of law enforcement training. "Oh, and Carter?" Captain Rivera added as I turned to leave. "Good luck on your exam today, though I doubt you'll need it." I walked out of his office feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Pure, undiluted pride in myself. The detective exam was grueling. 6 hours of written scenarios, procedural questions, and analytical challenges. I emerged exhausted but confident. I knew I'd done well. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at a restaurant I'd always wanted to try but could never afford. I sat alone at a small table by the window, ordered a glass of wine I couldn't pronounce, and watched the sunset over the Dallas skyline. My phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. "How'd the exam go?" I hesitated, then replied honestly, "Good. Really good." His response came quickly. Never doubted it. "Dinner this weekend?" My treat. For real this time. I smiled slightly. "Sure, Saturday works." As I paid my bill, the waitress commented, "Special occasion?" I considered the question. "Yes, I said finally. "I'm celebrating myself." She smiled knowingly. "Best reason there is." The next morning, Aunt Shirley called. "I'm outside your apartment. Breakfast?" We sat at a local diner, the kind with bottomless coffee and waitresses who call you honey. Aunt Shirley watched me over her mug, her eyes shrewd. "You look different," she observed. "Lighter." I nodded, stirring cream into my coffee. "I feel different. Mark told me about the cybersecurity program. That's quite an honor." "It is," I agreed. "I start Monday." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, Jessica. Not just for your career achievements, but for standing up for yourself. It was long overdue." I swallowed against the sudden tightness in my throat. "It's still hard. I worry about, Mom, about the house." "That's not your responsibility anymore," she said firmly. "It never should have been. Your mother is a grown woman. She'll figure it out. And if she doesn't?" Aunt Shirley's expression was gentle but resolute. "Then she'll face the consequences of her choices, just like we all do. Just like you've been doing for years." Her words settled over me like a benediction, absolving me of a burden I'd carried for too long. "Now," she said, changing the subject, "tell me about this apartment you're looking at." I hadn't told anyone about the apartment yet. A 1-bedroom in a secure building near the precinct, with hardwood floors and a balcony overlooking a small park. It was a significant upgrade from my current studio and still within my budget, especially with the raise that would come if I passed the detective exam. "How did you know?" I asked. She smiled mysteriously. "I pay attention. Unlike some people in this family, I notice things." I laughed, a genuine laugh that felt foreign but welcome. "It's nice. Really nice. I'm applying this weekend." "Good." She nodded decisively. It's time you lived somewhere worthy of you. As we finished breakfast, Aunt Shirley handed me a small box. I've been wanting to give you this for a while. Inside was a silver pendant, a delicate balance scale, the symbol of justice. My father gave this to me when I graduated law school, she explained. I never had a daughter to pass it to, but you embody everything this represents. Balance, fairness, strength. I clutched the pendant, speechless with emotion. Where are it when you start your training? She said. Remember who you are. On my way home, I stopped by the bank. With my detective exam completed and the cybersecurity training ahead, it was time to close one chapter of my life permanently. I closed my family support account, the separate account I'd created solely for tracking money sent to Mom and Brandon. I transferred the remaining balance to my personal savings. The bank manager processed the paperwork and asked, "Any particular reason for closing the account?" I thought about it for a moment. "Its purpose has been fulfilled," I said simply. That afternoon, I received an email from the property management company. My application for the new apartment had been approved. I could move in at the end of the month. Standing in the middle of my cramped studio, I felt a surge of anticipation. A new home, a new position, a new Jessica. The old spreadsheets and financial records sat in a box by the door, ready to be stored away, not forgotten, but no longer central to my identity. They represented a chapter of my life that had shaped me, but would no longer define me. My phone rang. It was Uncle Mark. "The results are in," he said without preamble. "You passed. Top scores in 5 years." I closed my eyes, savoring the moment. "Thank you for letting me know." There was a pause, then he added gruffly, "Detective Carter has a nice ring to it." "Yes," I thought as I hung up. "Yes, it does." The cybersecurity training program was unlike anything I'd experienced before. From the moment I stepped into the specialized facility at Quantico, I was immersed in a world of digital forensics, network security protocols, and advanced threat assessment. 20 officers from across the country had been selected. Most were men. Most had more years on the force than I did. And all of us were simultaneously intimidated and exhilarated by the challenge. "Carter, right?" A tall officer from Chicago introduced himself on the first day. "I heard you," A said the detective exam in Dallas. Word traveled fast in law enforcement circles. "News to me," I replied, though Uncle Mark's call had confirmed it. "Well, welcome to the deep end," he said, gesturing toward the state-of-the-art computer lab where we'd spend most of our training hours. "Hope you can swim." I could swim. In fact, I discovered I could practically breathe underwater in this environment. The meticulous attention to detail that had made me keep perfect financial records for years transferred seamlessly to tracking digital footprints and identifying patterns in cyber threats. By the end of the first week, I'd earned the grudging respect of both instructors and fellow trainees. By the end of the second, I was leading small group exercises in vulnerability assessment. "Officer Carter has a natural aptitude for this work," I overheard one instructor telling another. "She sees connections others miss." I smiled to myself, remembering all the connections I'd seen in my family's financial dependencies, connections they'd missed or chosen to ignore. The training was intense. 14-hour days, complex simulations, mountains of technical information to absorb. I fell into bed exhausted each night in the dormitory-style housing provided for trainees. But for the first time in years, my exhaustion came from investing in myself, not in others. The distinction made all the difference. Halfway through the program, we were given a weekend off. Most trainees headed to Washington, D.C. for sightseeing. I rented a car and drove to a small bed and breakfast in rural Virginia, seeking solitude and space to process everything I was learning about cybersecurity and about myself. The B&B was charming, a restored farmhouse with wide porches and rocking chairs overlooking rolling hills. I sat outside with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. My phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. "How's superhero training going?" I smiled, slightly at his characterization. "Intense, but good. I'm learning a lot. Mom misses you," he added after a moment. The familiar twinge of guilt appeared, but I acknowledged it without letting it consume me. "I'll call her tomorrow." "The mortgage is paid off," he continued. "I did it last week. First installment of my contract came through." I stared at those words, feeling an unexpected rush of emotion. For years, that mortgage had been my responsibility, my burden. Knowing it was finally, truly resolved, lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. "That's great, Brandon," I replied. "I'm proud of you." And I was. Despite everything, despite the years of imbalance and invisibility, I was genuinely proud of my brother for following through on his promise. "Coming home next weekend?" he asked. "Can't. Training schedule is packed, but I'll be back in Dallas in 6 weeks. We'll be here," he responded simply. The next morning, I called Mom as promised. Our conversation was different than our usual check-ins, less about her needs, more about my experiences. She listened attentively as I described the training program, asking thoughtful questions about what I was learning. "It sounds perfect for you," she said warmly. "You always were the puzzle solver in the family." "I'm enjoying it," I admitted. "It's challenging in all the right ways." There was a pause. Then she said hesitantly, "Brandon paid off the mortgage. He told me." "That's wonderful, Mom." "I've been thinking about getting a roommate," she continued. "The house is too big for just me, and it would help with utilities and groceries." I blinked in surprise. This was new. Mom actively seeking solutions instead of waiting for rescue. "That sounds practical," I said encouragingly. "The second bedroom is a good size. I've already put an ad in the paper. I'm interviewing a retired teacher next week." She paused. "I should have done this years ago, Jessica. I should have found ways to stand on my own 2 feet after your father left." The acknowledgement was unexpected and deeply validating. "It's never too late to start," I told her, echoing Aunt Shirley's words to me. "No," she agreed softly. "It's not." When I returned to Quantico, I threw myself back into training with renewed focus. The final 4 weeks of the program culminated in a complex simulation, a mock cyber attack on critical infrastructure that we had to detect, contain, and trace to its source. Our team of 5 officers worked around the clock, piecing together fragmented digital evidence, following electronic breadcrumbs across servers and networks. The simulation was deliberately designed to be nearly impossible to solve completely, but I saw the pattern. Just as I'd tracked every dollar through my family's financial ecosystem, I tracked every digital signature through the simulated attack. At 3 in the morning, fueled by nothing but determination and vending machine coffee, I found the breach point others had missed. "Here," I said, pointing to a line of code on my screen. "This is where they got in. And this," I pulled up another window, "is where they're hiding." The lead instructor, who had been silently observing our team, raised an eyebrow. "Impressive, Carter. Most teams never find that particular entry point." When the simulation ended, our team had the highest success rate of any group in the program's history. As we packed up to return to our respective precincts, the instructor handed me a business card. "The FBI's cyber division is always looking for talent like yours. When you're ready for a change, give me a call." I tucked the card into my wallet, another option in a future suddenly rich with possibilities. The flight back to Dallas felt like crossing a threshold. I was returning not just to my city, but to my new life. Newly promoted Detective Jessica Carter, cybersecurity specialist, woman in full possession of her worth. Uncle Mark was waiting at the airport, leaning against a column in the arrivals area. Not in uniform this time, just jeans and a polo shirt. An ordinary uncle picking up his niece. "Welcome home, detective," he said, taking my duffel bag. "Thanks for the ride," I replied, following him to the parking garage. "Your apartment's ready," he told me as we drove. "Aunt Shirley helped coordinate the movers. Hope that's okay." I nodded, touched by their thoughtfulness. "More than okay, thank you." We drove in comfortable silence for a while, the Dallas skyline growing larger through the windshield. Finally, Uncle Mark spoke again. "The department's creating a new cybercrime unit," he said casually. "Captain Rivera mentioned your name might be on the short list to join." I glanced at him, trying to read his expression. "Is that so?" He nodded. "Turns out you made quite an impression at Quantico. Word gets around." Pride bloomed in my chest. Pride in my accomplishments, recognized on their own merits. "I'd be interested," I said simply. As we pulled up to my new apartment building, Uncle Mark turned to face me. "Jessica, I want you to know something. What you did for this family, it wasn't just financial support. It was love. Real love. Not the showy kind. The kind that sacrifices silently." His voice roughened. "I didn't see it then. I see it now." I swallowed hard, unprepared for the emotion his words evoked. "Thank you for saying that." He nodded once, then helped carry my bags inside. The new apartment was everything I'd hoped for. Spacious, bright, with large windows and hardwood floors that gleamed in the afternoon sunlight. After Uncle Mark left, I walked through each room slowly, savoring the sense of achievement. This space was mine, earned through my own merit, paid for with my own money, a physical manifestation of my reclaimed independence. On the kitchen counter sat a small gift basket with a card signed by Mom, Brandon, Uncle Mark, and Aunt Shirley. To new beginnings. I placed Aunt Shirley's silver pendant around my neck, the scale of justice cool against my skin, and stood at my balcony overlooking the park below. I had crossed a bridge, from invisibility to recognition, from silent sacrifice to voiced truth, from supporting others' dreams to pursuing my own. The journey wasn't over. Relationships remained to be rebuilt, trust to be restored, boundaries to be maintained, but the foundation, my foundation, was solid now. Detective Jessica Carter was ready for whatever came next. 6 months into my new position with the Dallas Police Department's cybercrime unit, I finally found my rhythm. My days were filled with digital forensics, tracking online fraud schemes, and collaborating with federal agencies on cross-jurisdictional cases. The work was challenging and fulfilling in ways I hadn't imagined possible. My new apartment had become a true home, plants thriving on the balcony, bookshelves filled with criminal psychology and cybersecurity texts, walls adorned with photographs I'd taken during weekend hiking trips. For the first time in my adult life, I was investing in creating a space that reflected who I was, not just what I could afford. My relationship with my family had evolved into something more balanced. Mom had found a roommate, a retired librarian named Eleanor who shared her interest in gardening and classic films. The extra income allowed her to maintain the house comfortably without assistance. We had dinner together twice a month, conversations that increasingly centered on current events and shared interests rather than financial emergencies. Brandon and I were rebuilding our relationship one careful step at a time. He'd settled into his consulting role and was, somewhat to my surprise, excelling at it. The arrogance that had once defined him had softened into confidence tempered with humility. He'd repaid $28,000 of what he owed me. Not the full amount, but a significant portion that demonstrated genuine commitment. More importantly, he'd stopped, taking my support for granted. "I've been recommended for a project lead position," he told me during one of our monthly dinners. "It would mean managing a team of 5 consultants." "That's fantastic," I said sincerely. "You'd be good at that." He nodded, then added quietly, "I mentioned you in my interview." I raised an eyebrow. "Me? Why?" "They asked about my greatest professional influence." He met my gaze directly. "I told them about my sister who funded my career while living on ramen, who believed in me even when I didn't deserve it, who taught me that real success isn't just about achievement but about integrity." I stared at him, speechless. "They were impressed," he continued with a small smile. "Apparently, having a detective for a sister gives me credibility points." I laughed, touched by his acknowledgement. "Happy to help your brand, I guess." "You've helped more than you know," he said seriously. "Not just with money." It was moments like these that healed old wounds, not grand gestures or complete transformations, but small recognitions of truth that accumulated over time. Uncle Mark and I had developed a new professional relationship. As lieutenant overseeing several units including cybercrime, he was technically in my chain of command, but he scrupulously maintained appropriate boundaries. At work, I was Detective Carter, evaluated on my performance alone. Outside of work, he'd become more present as an uncle. He and Aunt Shirley invited me to Sunday dinners, called to check in during difficult cases, and never, not once, asked for financial assistance. One Tuesday morning, Captain Rivera called me into his office. "Detective Carter, have a seat." His expression was unreadable, which immediately put me on alert. "Sir, I've received an interesting request," he began, sliding a folder across his desk. "The FBI's Cyber Division is assembling a task force focused on emerging ransomware threats. They've specifically requested your participation." I opened the folder. Inside was a formal letter from the FBI, detailing a 6-month assignment in Washington, D.C., with the possibility of permanent placement afterward. "This is unexpected," I managed, though I immediately thought of the business card still tucked in my wallet. "Not to me," Captain Rivera replied. "Your work on the hospital breach case caught their attention. This is a significant opportunity, Detective." I scanned the document, noting the generous compensation package, the high-level security clearance, the prestigious assignment. "I'd need time to consider," I said carefully. He nodded. Of course. They need an answer by Friday. I carried the folder with me all day, periodically opening it to reread the offer. 6 months in DC, possibly longer, a career, advancement beyond what I'd imagined possible so quickly. Yet alongside the excitement, I felt an unexpected hesitation. Dallas was home. I'd just established my independence here, created a life that was finally my own. Was I ready to uproot again? That evening, I called the one person whose perspective I trusted implicitly. It's a remarkable opportunity, Aunt Shirley said when I explained the situation. But opportunities always come with costs. The question is whether what you gain outweighs what you might lose. I've worked hard to get where I am, I said, pacing my balcony. This could be the next step in a federal career path. You have, she agreed, which is precisely why you have choices now. Good ones. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, weighing my options. The FBI position offered prestige, advancement, new challenges. Staying meant continuity, deepening local connections, building on foundations I'd only recently established. My phone buzzed with a text from Uncle Mark. Heard about the FBI offer. Proud of you, whatever you decide. Then another from Brandon. Mom wants to host a family dinner this weekend. She's making your favorite lasagna. You in? I smiled, typing back. Wouldn't miss it. As darkness fell over Dallas, I made my decision. Friday morning, I walked into Captain Rivera's office with clear purpose. I've considered the FBI's offer, I began. He nodded, waiting. I'm declining it this time, I said firmly. I'd like to continue building our cybercrime unit here in Dallas. There's important work to be done locally, and I'm just getting started. A smile spread across his face. I was hoping you'd say that. The unit needs you, Detective Carter. Thank you, sir. I paused, then added, I've drafted a proposal for expanding our preventative education program to local businesses. With your permission, I'd like to implement it next quarter. On my desk by Monday, he agreed. And Detective, the FBI will come calling. Again, they recognize talent. Next time, I might be ready, I acknowledged. But for now, this is where I belong. The family dinner that weekend wasn't just another meal. As I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, I realized Mom had invited everyone. Brandon, Uncle Mark, Aunt Shirley, even Eleanor, the roommate. An impromptu family gathering for no apparent reason. Except there was a reason, I discovered as I entered the dining room. A cake sat in the center of the table, decorated with the words, Congratulations, Detective Carter. Brandon told us about the FBI offer, Mom explained, hugging me tightly. We wanted to celebrate your success, whether you took it or not. I looked around the table at their expectant faces. I decided to stay in Dallas, I said. For now, at least. The relief in their expressions was impossible to miss. Family dinner wouldn't be the same without you, Brandon said, raising his glass in a toast. To Jessica, the best of us. As glasses clinked around the table, I felt a profound sense of peace. Not because everything was perfect. It wasn't. Not because all past hurts had been erased. They hadn't. But because I had made my choice freely, based on what I wanted, not what others needed from me. The balance had been restored, not just in my family relationships, but within myself. Later that night, as I prepared to leave, Uncle Mark stopped me at the door. I never told you this, he said, his voice low, but the day you confronted us with that folder, that was the day I finally saw you clearly. Not as my responsible niece, but as a force to be reckoned with. He smiled slightly. I should have seen it sooner. We all have blind spots, I replied, thinking of my own. How long I'd allowed myself to be taken for granted. How I'd confused sacrifice with love. Some bigger than others, he acknowledged. I'm just glad you didn't let us keep you invisible. As I drove back to my apartment under a sky scattered with stars, I thought about visibility, about being seen, truly seen by others and by yourself. Sometimes the most revolutionary act isn't storming barricades or making grand gestures. Sometimes it's simply refusing to disappear. 1 year to the day after I'd placed that folder on the dining room table and changed the course of my family forever, I stood before a room full of police cadets at the Dallas Police Academy. Digital evidence, I explained, gesturing to the screen behind me, can be just as compelling as physical evidence, often more so, because people believe digital footprints can be erased completely. They can't. 30 earnest faces looked back at me, taking notes, asking questions. Captain Rivera had suggested I guest lecture for the Academy's new cybersecurity module, and I found an unexpected joy in teaching. Documentation matters, I continued. Thoroughness matters. The details you might think are insignificant could be the very threads that unravel an entire case. A young woman in the front row raised her hand. Detective Carter, what led you to specialize in cybercrime? I paused, considering the complex journey that had brought me here. I've always been detail-oriented, I said finally, and I understand the power of hidden information, how what's unseen can be more important than what's visible. After the lecture, the same cadet approached me as I gathered my materials. I really enjoyed your presentation, she said. I'm considering applying for the cybercrime unit after graduation. It's challenging work, I told her, but rewarding. She nodded earnestly. That's what drew me to it. I want to make a difference in a way that uses my specific strengths. I studied her, the determined set of her shoulders, the intelligent focus in her eyes. I saw something of myself in her earnestness, her desire to contribute meaningfully. What's your name, Cadet? Martinez, sir. Sophia Martinez. Well, Cadet Martinez, the unit's always looking. For sharp minds, keep my card. When you're eligible to apply, let me know. Her face lit up. I will. Thank you, Detective. As she walked away, I thought about cycles, how they continue, evolve, sometimes break. I thought about how Uncle Mark had once been my inspiration for joining the force, and how I might now serve as that inspiration for others. That evening, I met Aunt Shirley for our monthly dinner at a small Italian restaurant downtown. You look well, she observed as we settled into our corner table. Content. I am, I realized, somewhat surprised by the truth of it. Work is challenging in the right ways. I'm making a difference. And the family? I considered this. We're finding our way. It's not perfect, but it's honest. She nodded approvingly. Honest is better than perfect. Over pasta and wine, I told her about my lecture at the Academy, about Cadet Martinez, about the new case my unit was tackling involving identity theft targeting seniors. You've found your purpose, she said, and your boundaries. I had a good teacher, I replied, touching the silver scales pendant I still wore for important occasions. After dinner, walking back to our cars, Aunt Shirley linked her arm through mine. Have you thought any more about the house? I nodded. Mom had recently decided to downsize, claiming the family home was too big for her now that Eleanor was moving to be closer to her grandchildren. She'd offered to sell it to me at below market value. I'm still considering it, I said. Part of me thinks it would be poetic justice, owning the house I helped save, but another part wonders if I need a completely fresh start. There's no wrong answer, Aunt Shirley assured me. Just different paths. 2 days later, I found myself standing in the driveway of my childhood home, keys in hand. Mom had already moved to her new condo, a bright one-bedroom in a senior community with activities and amenities she was enthusiastically exploring. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house was empty now, echoing with memories, some painful, some precious. I walked through each room slowly, running my fingers along walls that had witnessed both my invisibility and my emergence. In my old bedroom, sunlight streamed through windows that once illuminated late-night study sessions for the Academy. In the dining room, I could almost see the ghost of that manila folder on the table, changing everything. My phone rang. Brandon. You at the house? He asked without preamble. Just looking around, I confirmed. Need help measuring for furniture or anything? I smiled at his assumption that I'd already decided to buy it. Not yet. Still thinking. Well, if you need a hand, let me know. I'm good for more than just taking these days. His self-deprecating humor was relatively new, part of the more authentic relationship we'd developed over the past year. I'll let you know, I promised. After we hung up, I wandered into the backyard. The old oak tree still stood, sturdy and unchanging, its branches spread wide over the patch of grass where I'd played as a child. I sat on the wooden swing Uncle Mark had hung from its lowest branch, 20 years ago, gently pushing myself back and forth. Here, in this quiet moment, I acknowledged how far I'd come, from the dutiful daughter silently shouldering her family's financial burdens to the confident detective charting her own course. The journey hadn't been linear. There had been setbacks, moments when old patterns threatened to reemerge, when guilt tugged at my resolve, when the temptation to slip back into invisible support felt almost irresistible. But I'd held firm, I'd maintained boundaries. I'd insisted on reciprocity in my relationships. And gradually, those around me had risen to meet my expectations. Not perfectly, not without occasional missteps, but with genuine effort. My phone buzzed with a text from Captain Rivera. Task force approved. You'll head it up. Details tomorrow. Another piece falling into place. The task force I'd proposed to coordinate cybercrime prevention across multiple jurisdictions had been my passion project for months. Leading it would be both a challenge and an honor. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, I made my decision about the house. I would buy it, not out of obligation or sentiment, but because I chose to. I would renovate it, make it truly mine, transform it from a symbol of invisible sacrifice into a testament to visible success. The front door opened, and Uncle Mark stepped onto the porch. "Thought I might find you here," he called. "Aunt Shirley sent dinner. Said you'd forget to eat while you were overthinking." I laughed, recognizing the truth in her assessment. She knows me well. He joined me in the backyard, handing me a container of homemade soup. "So, decided yet?" "I'm buying it," I said with newfound certainty. "But I'm changing everything, opening up the layout, modernizing, making it mine." He nodded approvingly. "Sounds right. New foundations on old ground." We sat in companionable silence as darkness fell, two officers from different generations, connected by blood, and now by mutual respect. "You know," he said finally, "in 25 years on the force, the most important lesson I've learned is that true strength isn't about power or authority. It's about knowing your worth and standing in it, even when no one else sees it." "I'm still learning that lesson," I admitted. "You're further along than most," he replied. "Further than I was at your age." Stars appeared overhead. I thought about the invisible officer I'd once been, the one who'd transferred thousands of dollars without recognition, who'd eaten ramen while funding her brother's dreams, who'd silently carried her family's financial burdens. She wasn't gone, that quiet, dutiful young woman. She was still part of me, but she'd been joined by someone stronger, someone who'd learned that self-respect wasn't selfish, that boundaries weren't cruel, that visibility wasn't vanity. "I've been thinking about that contract," I said suddenly. "The one Brandon signed and forgot about." Uncle Mark raised an eyebrow, waiting. "I'm going to frame it," I decided. "Hang it in my office as a reminder." "Of what?" I smiled, feeling the rightness of it settle in my chest. "That I matter. That what I contribute matters. That being seen matters." Later that night, standing alone in what would soon be my house, truly mine, paid for with my own success, I felt the full circle of my journey complete itself. The quiet achiever had become the visible success. The silent supporter had found her voice. The invisible officer had stepped into the light. And in that light, I could finally see myself. Clearly, not just as daughter, sister, or detective, but as Jessica Carter, whole and complete, visible at last.